Right, year 11. We've reached the point where, after 90 minutes of the exam, you've successfully written a four paragraph Calsk essay on Animal Farm, a 4-paragraph Calsk essay combining 2 poems, 2 paragraphs about each one, hopefully. And at this stage, you are into the unknown. You now look for the first time, because you should not have bothered looking at it while you had lots of things in your memory to deal with, you are now looking at the 2 unseen poems. First, very important point to make, it will say 27.1 and 27.2. The first poem is worth 24 marks. The second question, where you compare 2 poems, is only worth 8 marks. And we've often marked essays from people who have written more for the second question than they have for the first. And it's the sort of way you can throw away marks so easily. You have got to be aiming for 3 paragraphs, okay, using Calsk rather than Calsk now, because there is no context. You had never seen this before. No teacher has taught you the background to this or what was going on in the author's head. You are simply trying to anticipate the best you can, okay, how to answer that question. And in this particular past paper example that somebody's already made some highlighting on, but in autumn, how does the poet present the effects of the season of autumn? Now, the person who underlined this, they went for a phrase, so you could talk about, firstly, the poet presents the effects of autumn as being this. So you might want to focus on effects. You know you're looking at what does autumn make me feel, okay? So, or what does it autumn make this particular narrator feel, this particular character, okay? You could also treat autumn as a character in its own right, okay? When you're looking at who is the sea here, I'm not writing about Romeo anymore, I'm not writing about Napoleon, but you are looking at autumn, and you may get something that's about a person rather than a place or a season or a thing, but you can think sort of creatively and outside the box about who my character is. We're not going to look through the poem particularly, because you're not going to get this poem in the exam tomorrow. This is one from a past paper. But talk you through the process of the sort of decisions you make when you read it for the first time, which shouldn't take you very long, okay, but you've already read the question, so you already know, even if you struggled with the question. Say you got a poem about death, you might not be that clear about what the poem's about, but you would do, because it would say, how does the poet present attitudes towards death? And so you would know that from that key word that is the main theme of the poem, and therefore you'd be looking for evidence of where death is mentioned in there. Here, we're looking for the effects of autumn. So instantly, we're looking at the beginning. What, you would like, for structure, you could ask yourself the question, okay, how many stanzas are there? In this case, there is only the one, all right? So you can't talk about in the first stanza, we learn, and then in a later paragraph, by the final stanza, it is clear that, or the author has presented the effects differently because, okay? But you certainly can write about the first line, if the first line is good, or the first 2 lines, or the opening image in the poem. And you could write about something that's near the end as 2 of your 3 paragraphs. And it's up to you where you take your third idea from. But if we look at the start of this, autumn arrives like an experienced robber, grabbing the green stuff. Now, that's quite a long quote, and in fact, it could go even further. There's a lot of enjambment here, but you don't have to copy out a huge, long quotation here. You might automatically have identified that there is a simile in the first 2 lines there, okay? When it reads on, and then you had to question, well, why is autumn being compared to an experienced robber? It's near the end of the year, so it's more mature. It's been doing this for a long time. Grabbing the green stuff, this imagery, which again, that's quite ambiguous there, because green stuff makes you think of taking away the grass. But at the same time, on a different level, green stuff is a slang term for money. Okay, so in terms of, well, what do they really mean about autumn? Why are they talking in terms of nature? Why are they talking in terms of wealth? And why are they making this comparison? So there's a paragraph there that you could make using Calsk. Okay, you could talk about the character of autumn. You could talk about the big idea that the author is authoring. Okay, about the idea that of autumn's experience and wisdom taking over the world and replacing the summer, which was maybe a more joyful time, but sort of exploiting that. Later on it goes on to talk about the adverb cunningly. So you've got your big idea, you've got your character, you're zooming in on language with a simile, or you might focus on a noun like robber or an adjective like experience, okay? And along the way, because you'd mentioned it's at the start, you could be exploring how this might foreshadow something later on. Okay, I'm not saying it definitely does, but you should always be thinking, what does the start suggest? And then at the end, how does it link back? Okay, could it be cyclical? Not necessarily. Okay, but tying in the start and the end. If you look at the end, we'd get it changes the temperature of the earth till the normally placid sky glows red with a quiet rage. Doesn't really feel particularly cyclical, but you've got this idea. You started with the imagery of the colour green, and you've got the opposite colour in traffic light terms. We've got the colour that's go and that's welcoming and that's natural, and we've got the threat of glows red with a quiet rage. Okay, so we had this cunning, silent, stealthy autumn robber. Okay, but then by the end, we've got this sense of an earth that's raging and angry, and you would have to explore why. What is this? What are the different effects of the season? So always look at the start. Always look at the end. Of course, you've got to read the whole thing, because there may be something vital in the middle that you have missed, which is the key to why it's changed from green to red. But it's very easy to get two of your ideas and also be making structural links. The sort of questions we always say to you to be thinking about is, where there are lots of positives or negatives. Is it a positive start? Is it a negative ending? Or is it the other way around? Does it start negatively and end positively? In this case, it seems quite a sinister opening, leading to a very negative and sort of potentially apocalyptic ending. Glows red with a quiet rage, as if something calm is now coming to a very definite end. Okay? You look at how many stanzas in the poem, or you look at the beginning and ending if it's just one stanza, one verse of the poem. You might look at, are there words which cover the same similar meaning? So is there a similar semantic field? Okay, so we've got green, we've got colourful, and we've got red sort of leaping about there, okay? We've got lots of descriptions of nouns to do with trees, so branches and dead leaves, and the wind. We've got sort of seasonal effects, so you might decide upon things that are connected, and if you can't see it, do not write it. Do not make up a semantic field that is not there unless it is clear, okay? You might question why a line carries on to make sense, so you might look at the enjambment, but you might also look at, is there any repetition in there, okay? And again, there isn't that much in this particular example as I'm skimming through it. But the point is, if something's been repeated, why has it been repeated? Is it anaphoric? Is it a phrase that's been repeated? A bit like in Charge of the Light Brigade. There's but to make reply, there's but to do and die, there's not to reason why. I think I put them in the wrong order. But why was that repetition of the pronoun theirs in that particular poem? And at a very simple level, are there any similes in there that you can use, or metaphors in there, okay? Or use of personification? Autumn is being described in human terms. Or could a person be described in animal terms, anthropomorphically, okay? Is there pathetic fallacy? Is the weather fitting the mood? You need to consider all of the different techniques that a poet can use. You're basically using all the things that you'd used in the English anthology and bringing those in to support with your ideas. Is there also a volta? So is there a moment, a turning point in this? Now, always look for a word like the conjunction but, which I can't see, or like except, like we saw in Remains, end of story, except not really. You could interpret so as one of those short conjunctions that lead into a change, and I'll have to look into that more closely. But I'm always on the look for a possible volta if there is one. And remember, in the end, you might find 5 or 6 techniques, but you've only got time to talk about 3 things that really matter. So please don't think you had to list every single feature you'd ever spotted. It's not about that. Right? We would far rather that you zoom in on a really powerful word choice than pick up a simile or a volta that you could not say very much about. Okay? So it's applying your skills in reading a poem and interpreting it and applying it to the question. And ultimately being able then to use the same sort of wording and phrasing. Firstly, the poet, or Bold in this case, okay, you've got the author's name. Firstly, Bold presents the effects of autumn in a slightly sinister way when he creates the opening image of autumn being like an experienced robber. This simile can suggest maturity, but also somebody who has chosen a life of crime and therefore is not to be trusted. That's the kind of thing that we are starting to explore the language. You're always ultimately questioning why has this been put in and explaining that to the author, explaining that to the examiner to be able to give you as many marks of those 24 as are humanly possible.